you. So it's not my presentation, obviously. The last time we met, I chatted just briefly with everybody. I asked for a raise of hands to see how many people went from AAA games to social games. It was a large number of people here, surprisingly. And the thing I talked about was how we converted non-gamers to gamers. We were taking 43-year-old women, mother of two, average Facebook user, and turning them into gamers. And how they were becoming hungry for deeper game mechanics, hungry for deeper mechanics built into the games instead of just the hamster click wheel. And looking at the variety of people out there making Facebook games, John, Romero, and Brenda, what they're doing on Ravenwood Fair just blew my mind. I thought when Frontierville first came out, I saw the first game that truly was kind of taking that the game story arc, where you had to go and find a wife and build your cabin to entice her to come to live with you. And looking at what they're doing with Ravenwood Fair is just astounding to me, seeing these story arcs that are being brought into social games. And so I reached out to John and Brenda and asked them if they could come and talk here tonight and kind of talk about how they're implementing traditional AAA game mechanics into the social world. And so here they are, John and Brenda.
Hi, wow, big room full of people. It's going to smell like game developer in here pretty soon. Just warning, there's a lot of us. So I'm Brenda. Everybody knows the hair here. This is John. Yeah, I don't know. I think we are fairly close in hair quality. Anyway, we have massive quantities of hair. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Ravenwood Fair, which is a game we worked on and developed for LOL Apps. And we'll tell you, it's sort of a, the game is still live, right? So it's a kind of a, here's what we learned going through it and having transitioned into this particular space. And then there'll be time for questions after. So we're going to go back and forth. It's pretty free form. God knows what we're going to say. We're trying to be controlled because I see the camera back there. This will be broadcast. So the larger question is why social games, which I think I'll answer and then you can answer. For me, why social games, why I wanted to go into this is because I worked on every kind of game possible, but the social game market was the first time that I, as a I was 43 at the time, 43-year-old woman was actually the target demographic for games. That has never friggin' mattered, but it matters now, and that's very, very exciting. I got all kinds of contract opportunities because I'm a woman. God love it, and I don't care how sexist that is. I've been dealing with that for all of my career, so it's my turn. It's our turn at the wheel. Anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about either. But it was very exciting, and I loved the problem. Right? I loved the problem of how do you do asynchronous game design for millions of players. And the concept of, as a mom of three, we've been game developers for a long time. You have to be if you're a mom. So the concept that 43-year-old women we're not gamers, they're born gamers, because you don't have a choice if you've got kids. You got to keep people busy. You got to make stuff up constantly, even if it's garbage, but you still make it up. So I loved the idea of Facebook. I loved the idea of getting back into rapid iteration. I loved the idea of super small teams. And so that was why the market was very interesting to me. Go.
I was running an MMO company for like 4 years. Founded it in 2005. It's called Gazillion Entertainment, and I've made pretty much all kinds of games up until social, and so I basically was watching the market heat up in 2009, and saw everybody starting to play these games, and they look very interesting to me as a game designer because their patterns are totally different than hardcore gaming patterns, like the patterns of play and the kind of design patterns. So even though a lot of the concepts are really simple to design, the way that they're implemented and the way that they tie together are totally unlike every other kind of game that I'd made. So I was interested in it, and Brenda was at LOL Apps as a creative director. And I guess we'll get into that, but she needed me to come help out on the game, so it was a perfect opportunity.
All right, so that leads into, go slide, there it is. All right, so you wouldn't necessarily think, right, that making a game like Doom would be this amazing liability, but if you're trying to get into the social space, it is.
Yeah, so I was basically looking around, what social company could I get into to kind of prove that I could develop a social game, and I tried to talk to a few different social companies, And they basically weren't just interested in talking because I was like the FPS guy. And, even though that was only like during the 90s, and they hadn't looked and seen that I had made, a ton of games.
How many games have you done since Doom?
Oh, since Doom? I don't know, a lot, No, like in total, like 135 games, but Doom, those games were like, I don't know, 12 games of all of them.
So he's not exaggerating that number, which just makes me, I've done 30 games, I want to say, proudly.
So yeah, I basically couldn't get meetings with these guys because they weren't interested because somehow I can't design anything other than that. So that was kind of bizarre. I'm normally used to just starting my own company, so that was going to happen eventually if I didn't get into someone's company.
So for me, he's thinking about exploring the social space. I'm actually working at Low Labs, and there were 2 games that were currently in production. And there were several, we had a couple game designers there, but basically we had one person, there were 3 games, I should say. So there's 1 game designer is working on that particular game, but there's 2 games that are currently in production, and one of those babies is going to ship first. And so I asked the powers that be which game is going to go, and off I go onto Critter Island, and that's the game that needs to go out first. Meanwhile, there's this other thing floating around out there that needed another game designer. And so I say to John, hey, listen, if you're interested in this, I've got an opportunity, that you could come consult and, and work on this other game, which is not, at this point, it's just sort of it's a running prototype, which we'll show you some pictures of. And so I asked him, and then I approached Low Labs, the powers that be, and said, hey, would you be interested in Romero coming to work on this? And already being familiar with the fact that, unfortunately, he made Doom, I sort of headed them off and said, listen, he's done a ton of other stuff besides shooters, he's made a bunch of other games, and I think he'd be perfect for this. So go ahead and talk. So they said, yes, bring him in, and then we'll talk about the starting state.
Initially I came to Low Labs before even doing this to give a pep talk to the programmers because they'd already been through 2 redesigns of this game that they were working on, but there was nothing there really, so they were kind of bummed out, and I had to kind of talk to them about, hey, you're lucky that you could survive a restart. Most companies just kill the whole team and you're done. Then they asked me to come in, and I came in, and the parameters for the game, because I looked at the game and I'm like, okay, I need to do something else than this. So the parameters were just make a game in a month and a half. So that was pretty much it. It was like it really needed to be done by the end of September, and I was talking to them around the beginning of August, and I couldn't start until like the middle of August. So they basically said, do whatever, but it's got to get done by the end of September. So I had to go into like super turbo mode on designing this thing and getting it started. The team was super demoralized because they'd already gotten their game redesigned. They had another game designer come in, and that didn't work out. And so the team was really small. It was only 4 programmers, and maybe there was 1 artist on it. And so I needed to build an art team like really quick. So I had to look at come up with the game idea. I had to look at the starting state of the game, which was what kind of technology they had. So they had a little engine. They had a bunch of code running that could do certain things to objects in the engine. So I had to look at the code that they had, so I wasn't throwing anything away. I was going to use the engine, find out what the engine did best, try and capitalize on what it did best, which was drawing a lot of stuff on the screen at once. And then basically try to come up with a game design. So I did that. It was probably a week or something, where I needed to find the best game on Facebook, which was Frontierville at that time, and just play for 3 days straight on that game to understand every pattern that was in it, and then come up with an art style, which was a painterly art style, and then kind of find out who was going to be a lead. And this team had never shipped a game in their whole lives ever, so they had no idea how to make one. So I had to hurry up and put together an art team, design a game, and get this thing done so it could be done in a month and a half.
Yeah, so this team, very obviously, they worked their asses off, right? It was pretty much as close as a game designer will ever get to Iron Chef. And there was another thing that I think is important to say. So as much as you can take a look at a particular game and go, oh, that's the best game, and identify the best game, if any of you are thinking of making social games, or even games in general, that's not necessarily the route to go. It's the last stop on the clear route to go. But before this, I mean, this was like playing every single game on Facebook that meant anything to anybody, grokking every single pattern, so that you could actually say, how could we innovate on this and make it better? Because if you're unaware of the entire play space, I still play at least 5 new games a day on Facebook. And if you're unaware of the entire play space, you're going to miss really critical innovation. So we had already been swimming in the Facebook blob, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I'd already played Pet Society. I mean, every kind of fish tank thing and island thing out there. So I already knew every kind of design pattern that was on there. But like, I needed to.
Oh, so you're already
go
talking
deep
about
onto
this inspiration.
Yeah, so the inspiration was Frontierville.
Whoa.
Because what is the game for? The game is there to make money, right? Like, this company it's got to survive off money. Got to make a game that's going to make money. So Frontierville was a game that looked like it would make the most money because of the energy model. It was implemented in a good way. So I decided energy model, some balloon payment stuff, building things, and decorating. So that was like just the basic foundation. The incremental innovation slide here is because you can't, in the Facebook space, you can't design a game that's far beyond the games that are already on Facebook. Otherwise, the 500 million players will not get it, because these people are not normal hardcore players. So the game design has to be possibly a little bit better than the one before, and you can't jump too high. And I've talked to multiple developers and heads of social companies since then. They all understand that you don't overthrow your receiver on the game design side, otherwise you lose an audience. So incremental innovation was really important, to basically take what was there and just go a little bit beyond it, in some of the patterns.
I think there's part of the incremental innovation too. So I'm a very hardcore Civ player. I absolutely adore Civilization. It's my second favorite game right now after Ghost Recon, the old Ghost Recon, not the new Ghost Recon, just to clarify. But I think one of the temptations that people have is they dumb down the Facebook market. And my Facebook player that I watch, I mean, literally, I have, and if you're developing in this space, you should have somebody whose page you stalk. And so mine, I won't say her name, I won't say her full name, but her first name is Julie. And she has a master's degree and 2 kids. She is not a dumb woman. She's a super smart woman. She plays Facebook games like crazy, and I know she is my target market. And with her, it's what do you want to do? Like, now, one of the things that I think the traditional game industry, and everybody does this so far that we've known that, that we've talked with or mentoring that come into this space is, I know how to do this. I'm a hardcore game developer. I can bring them all over to my side, which is, you don't need that, right? Like, nobody has said, I liken Facebook gameplay to knitting. I'm going to be at GDC, I'm going to be on the Social Game Developers Rant. And I plan to, well, I can't tell you what I plan to do, but it involves knitting. Anyway, because otherwise I'll get it away, and the people I'm ranting against will come up with a defense. Anyway, and so good. Jonathan Blow can defend against knitting right now. There, I'll give him that for free. Anyway, so I liken social gameplay in some cases to knitting. And I don't think any of us are sitting there saying we need to make knitting more complicated because we like hardcore knitting, right? knitting is fine. It's just the way it is. And when I go to play social games, I'm literally, it's a tactical fun strike. I want to go in, I want to get shit done, and I want to get out. And that's very much the way social games are. I never sit down for like, hey, I'm going to go play 5 minutes of Civ. I never do that. Nobody ever does that, right? I think probably the closest game that succeeds in straddling the hardcore world and the social world is WoW. Because you can go in and play 10 minutes of WoW, and you can actually get up, just got to get one little thing, okay, I did it, and I can get out. You actually can do that, but that's super rare and obviously something pretty genius. All right, so yeah, Tech, go ahead.
So the technology that they had, the engine that they were using, was written by a guy who was a vet in the game industry for 20 years, and he had programmed Populous, Syndicate, Dungeon Keeper, Magic Carpet, all these games in England. And so he wrote this engine that ran really, really fast. And a lot of the social companies make the mistake of not knowing how to take control of Flash and make it do exactly what you want at a lower level. And so a lot of games out there are slow, and this engine is extremely fast. Normally, when you see all of these trees on the screen in some other company's engine and all the little rides and stuff, it's basically letting Flash draw that shape. every frame it's going, here's a draw call, draw that tree, draw this tree, draw this tree. You end up with thousands of draw calls per frame. The engine that they were using is one draw call per frame. It basically renders everything in a background buffer and attaches it to the stage, and boom, it's up there. So they had a really awesome engine that was really, really fast, written by a vet, written really well. And so because the engine was so fast, I wanted to capitalize on the speed, and I wanted to show off how cool this engine was. And so the energy mechanic coupled with like chopping, which is something you do in Frontierville, but Frontierville's screen is not full of trees. It's got some at the back and some down near the front, and the center is open for decoration. And in this game, I wanted it to be just packed full of trees. I wanted the player to just see, wow, and they scroll and go, no way. So I was real impressed with the technology that they had. The art direction of the game, I wanted to basically make the best looking game on Facebook, because a lot of the stuff was too cartoony. It was almost like, these games are really simple design patterns, so why don't we just make some really simple art to go along with it, like kind of making fun of it. And I wanted to make something that looked really awesome on Facebook. So
these are actually, these are from the
this is old stuff, old
except
art.
the middle is the new, but this was actually the old art of the game. And one of the challenges that we've both noticed in the Facebook space is how the art direction is more around the calendar than around the world you're trying to build. So it's like, well, what are we going to do for Christmas? What are we going to do for Mother's Day? And it kind of loses the lore of the world, but players remember the world because of its lore, and it develops its own personality. Because Christmas is not a personality, right? Eventually Christmas becomes something that we're, paying for or whatever.
It's just a pack.
Yeah, it's just a pack. But in this particular game, we really wanted to have this overall theme that felt like it belonged to its own place, its own world, and not just a world calendar.
And then we create the different holiday events that are actually designed into the IP to make sense, and not just tacked on as content filler type stuff.
For this too, what was also interesting, there was no, at the time, and this is something else in this bridging the worlds, for those of you who've crossed over from AAA to the social space, a lot of times in social companies there are silos. So all the art people sit over there, and all the coders will be over there, and this group of PMs sits in the middle. And it's odd if you come from the traditional space where you're like, but I need my lead artist next to me, and I need my lead coder somewhere near me. And so there was this massive reshuffling of desks and arguments about whether the light should be on or light should be off. Hey, just for the hell of it, how many of you believe you should have lights off in game companies? All right, how many of you prefer to work with bright lights overhead? Really? Okay, sorry.
These are evil lights. They're non-creative. 60 hertz kills creativity.
All right, so we had these light art, but anyway, eventually all the teams got rearranged and everything was fine, and we resolved the war of light and darkness. Darkness won. And so but we had to split it was really fairly epic.
Well, let me
and
just
the lights are probably
talk about
on now.
Okay,
Anyway.
so light-wise,
No, wait.
you
Massive trend.
can always add light to darkness, but you can't go the other way. So if you have a dark room and people need light, you put light next to them or around them or whatever.
You can
but
tell how evolved.
it's a huge deal.
God.
It's a huge deal, especially to artists that don't want glare and don't want this,
All right.
this other color. So anyway, the art direction was important,
Speaking of art, well, wait,
which had to do with
I
light.
was sashaying onto a point before I deflected us completely off of it. So the point actually is this game didn't even have a lead artist.
No
at
art
the time.
director.
And so he did all the early art direction on the game, and then from this art silo, basically pulled Christine McTiernan out, who's just an amazing artist and who led the direction. And this is the first time as a lead in her entire career. She did an amazing job. And in fact, Justin Rosenthal was the lead coder on this, and he also deserves great credit for that.
Yeah, first time on a game with these people. So this is like really old looking graphics and UI and
What's particularly interesting about this, so this is one of obviously if you've played Ravenwood Fair, you have never seen something that says Cleo is a very awesome T1 NPC, whatever the hell that means. I don't even know what that means. This is some early prototype stuff that I had going around, so you can tell this has like the hooks of the old game industry in here, right? That we're used to worlds where you've basically turned me into a hostage, okay? So now I'm sitting, I've already paid your, $49, $59 for the game. I'm gonna sit here and try to play it even if it sucks, right? But the social game player is not interested. Your game is one part of a Facebook blob, right? And I may be on my lunch hour. If I'm the average Facebook player on my lunch hour, I'm gonna play 5 to 7, maybe 10 games if I'm fast. And so as I'm going through, your game better fit with the one before it, and it better fit with the one after it, because if your interface is even slightly weird to me, I'm done and I'm out. So the second I see NPC, what does NPC, I don't know what that means. I don't even care what it means. I'm gone. And also the game is obviously at this point having way more fun than the player, right? I don't even know what any of this means. And so you can see also like this, the font changed, the colors changed, lots of stuff changed. And like likes, what does this mean? Likes polygons? I don't even know what that means there. Some other stuff you can see, here the world kind of doesn't really have much of a personality. We actually added in visitor quests after the fact now. But the game radically changed in design, radically changed in art. And when he says, so it ended up being shipped in 2.5 months, but that 2.5 months is calendar time. There was a lot of the 2.5 days in one day, it felt like, a lot of 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. We had to leave by 4. We would just be screwed the next day trying to even function. There's
more funny stuff.
Example of we don't know what's going on there.
Old store.
Yeah, this is the old. I was just trying to go through. I was trying to go through and find some samples. But these are great examples of what not to do in the casual space. Because if you were like right now, and I'm in a room full of game developers, what's the best decision? You're game developers. How can you not figure out whether this rat head is better for $450 versus the skull for $850? How do you not know, right? I mean, I don't know. And so the casual player, literally, if you look at it, like I always liken every single decision I make in a casual game to every type of productivity software I want to use, right? Because if you have this piece of productivity software and you're like, what does that mean? Right? That's exactly how it turns to the casual player. But they don't have to play your game because there's 9 gigazillion titles. While we were sitting here, 5 Facebook games were released in the last minute alone, right?
There's like 20,000 apps on Facebook.
So if they don't get it the second they look at it, forget it. This and super incremental innovation is incredibly important. But anyway, all this stuff got stripped out and it was just brought down to the simplest elements. And one of the things that I've learned, and that certainly that applies to your career, particularly with shooters, is the simpler it is, the more obvious it is, the better. Always. That just never fails. Sound direction. Yes, Facebook games and sound.
So sound is normally tacked on at the end on even AAA games usually. But to me, sound is 1/3 of the entire experience. You have video, and you have audio, and you have the interaction and the design. So to me, sound is super important, and it needs to be there from day one. So this team had no sound person, not even in the whole company. There's not one sound person there. So I told the team that I'm going to do all the sound. I'm doing the music, I'm doing the sound, everything, doing the programming of it. So I told them not to worry about it. Done it for decades. So that was a lot of fun putting the sound in as the game was developing, so it could get that theme song going and making it repeat and seeing if it was no good and modifying it and everything you have to do to make these songs massively repeatable, like you're playing an old Super Nintendo game. So I basically did a ton of work, creating all the sounds, and I had a composer to do the music for the game, and did a lot of work with him to get the song to the point that it's at now. But it was, during the development of the entire game, it was all about making sure that the palette of sounds all worked together. They worked with the time period of the game is supposed to be medieval, and they're a bunch of animals, so they can't be advanced electronic sounds. So everything had to be done with kind of medieval instruments. All the sound had to be kind of made the same way, so everything had to kind of be in the correct era, and everything needed to have sound. And so I spent a lot of time making sure the quality, the sample was was like 80 kilohertz samples instead of like 22 or something, 16, something really low. So I spent a ton of time making sure that the sound is going to be, the best I'd heard on Facebook. And during development, I pulled a ton of sounds off the net that were really low quality, but in the sample rate was really low quality, just to see what kind of sounds I want, because I didn't want to like buy a bunch of stuff I wasn't going to use. So I just wanted to rip a bunch of stuff to figure out what I wanted, then go buy the high res versions of those sounds. And so when the team started hearing the sounds sounding that bad, they were really worried that the game was was going down the wrong path, and maybe the design is going there too, because they didn't really get the design either. So I just assured them not to worry about it. This is just the prototype of the sound, period. And then after probably a few weeks, then it started sounding for real. And the game sounds pretty good, I think.
Wait, before you, there's like two extra things. I should say it was Dren McDonald, right?
Dren McDonald
I
did.
was making sure.
He did he didn't do the new song, not the original one.
Okay, well so Dren is actually the sound designer in this title. And a couple of things I would add to this in developing games. So the game that I'm working on right now, which I can't tell you about, but we, over lunch, we sat with the 1 or 2 minute loop playing again and again and again and again. Just a regular lunch, us sitting there eating with that playing in the background. So not critiquing it or anything. So if you can sit through a lunch with a sound loop and not want to shut it off, that's probably your song. And I think another mistake that people, and we'll do, we have some revisions we've suggested on it, and so we'll get the new one back. Because really, that's really how long people might be listening to it, or they're going to come back and hear it again. So you want to make sure it doesn't grate on you after that period of time, and it's a rare piece of music that doesn't. Another thing that I think is key about this is the tendency for people to play, like, oh, don't worry about sound, we can do it low, or we can, all the low res or whatever. And I think that that's a tremendous mistake, because remember that your game or any social game is just one part of a Facebook blob, right? So if I'm going, you need to put yourself right up against the absolute best sounding game and best looking game, because they may either leave that game to come to your game and go, oh, or leave your game to go to the other game and go, wow, this is so much better. So you will be compared against the best games on Facebook, always. And so we were trying to be particularly aware of that. You mentioned too, like the not getting the design. Well, actually, I think we talk about that later.
In developing the song, it's important to tell the composer, or to show the composer what you mean by here's the song that I want. It's not like I just say, hey, I need a song. This is like a carnival. Just let them do whatever. It's really important to explain everything about the game and to give them a reference song to go off of. So the reference song, the song that I wanted in the game, and which obviously you can't take a commercial song that was in some other game and just stick it in yours. So it was here's the inspiration song, and it was a song called "Beware the Forest's Mushrooms" from Super Mario RPG from 1995. And so that I really liked that song. It had a little bit of a faster tempo than I liked, and so I told the guy doing the music, this is the song I wish I had. It's a little fast. People that play these games, they're just trying to chill out, and this tempo is a little too quick, so we got to slow it down. But this is the kind of note progression I like. Here's what I like about the song. It's very positive and upbeat. It has kind of a scary section that I think references our forest that's scary. And it kind of goes back up, and it's not symmetrical, it's not repeated. It's a song that you can listen to for a full 2 minutes and be entertained, and then it goes back to the beginning and you don't even notice that it actually restarted. So I gave him a lot of other samples of songs that I really, really like, really high quality, and explained in those songs why I liked those songs and what I liked about them that hopefully he can get in this one song. So he kind of took all of this data and created the song that we have. And I was really worried for a while there, because I didn't know if it was going to make it, because I got all these samples back and they weren't matching what I wanted. They weren't things I could listen to for hours, until he finally sent one that just I could say, okay, we can work on this one and make it good. With the expansion that we're releasing tomorrow, that was a completely different situation, because the first guy who did the original song is pretty new. in making, composing music. He's probably, I don't know, maybe 10 years or something. The guy that we have doing the music now for this expansion is at least 20 years he's been doing this. And so I could say, here's the reference song. This is exactly what I want, which is a song called The Devil's Lab from Final Fantasy VI, Japanese. And so I really like that because it matched the mine, where you're down in the mine mining and banging on stuff. And so he came back with an amazing song, first try, done. So he's a super pro. But yeah, I pay super attention to all of the audio in the game, every single thing, how it interacts with the background music. In fact, when the music was off, and Brenda was, 2 in the morning, the music's off and she's doing stuff. The game's running in another window behind whatever, and someone in the game screams, and it just shocked her. She's just like, you got to do something about this. Game's just quiet when there's no music going.
I had my headphones on, and there was no other scream, and I threw my mouse. I nearly fell out of my friggin' chair. It was, and I'm not exaggerating. It was a pretty special moment.
So basically, I'm like, well, okay, I need to put something in the background so you know that there's something going on, that there's the game is actually playing or something. So it was kind of natural that it should sound just like the forest sounds. So I made a 2-minute forest loop out of probably 10 different tracks of, buying samples of spotted owls and putting them in strategic places and doing some nighttime sections. And, it's a pretty involved loop that sounds real simple when you're listening to it, but it's people that are into bird watching will totally know who these birds are when they listen to them. So there's something there for people that have that special, that special thing.
One thing just to interject at this point, which I think is really cool, so if you've been in the game industry or around the game industry for a long time, the absolute luxury that we had working on this was amazing. I mean, if you've ever worked on a AAA title, the odds of you being able to do art direction, sound direction, coding, and design, it's not going to happen, right? Unless you're like, you can just say, I own the company and wish to do some of that. But this game, because it's small and because you're working with such small teams, we were able to do a ton of work in a ton of different areas, and it's immensely satisfying creatively.
Yeah.
All right, world design. Oh, okay, so this is me, right?
Yeah.
So world design.
Talk about the whole reason why you had to do it too. The timing of.
Hold on a minute. What?
You had to do everything at the same time. I'm doing this.
Oh yeah. Okay, never mind. So we're back to our regularly scheduled talk now. All right. So with the world design, now understand 2.5 months, right? So what was amazing about this is, this is not advised and should not be done by untrained non-professionals. This is dangerous game development. So as John is building up the game, right? It's 2.5 months. The game, just think of the game as like, what are we doing? Okay, we're almost done. Yay, alpha, looks awesome. Okay, let's polish, ship. So just think of that as like an egg, right? John is still down here somewhere below that we're coming back in portion of the game. But we've got to come back in because we got to ship this baby, right? So there's this incredibly dangerous, unfinished middle of the game. And he's working down here, but I've got to start closing and getting this thing ready to ship. So I've got to start knowing what this world is going to look like, what quests are going to be there, what is the mentor going to say when you show up, so you know exactly what to do. Unlike the tutorial, unlike traditional games, players or AAA games, you just come in here and it literally needs to be you sit in that chair. Good job! Yay! Gain a level. Okay, now moon over. Yay! Social game. Scroll the screen. Good job! I mean, really, some of the things that we've discovered through metrics, players don't know that they can scroll the screen. Right, I remember a friend of mine who was so excited to get her parents going in City of Heroes, and then she realized realized just how big the gulf was when her mom says, "Well, how do I move?" Many of us take walking in worlds totally for granted. Not your average, probably there's many more people that have no idea how to do that than there is of us who do know how. So anyway, as John is still getting all the systems in and they're not even coded, or it's like this gulf between two designers. So John and I have known each other since '87. So fortunately, great friends. We knew, he could. What are you doing? Okay, awesome. This is except for the beginning of this one. What are you talking about? But normally it's not like that. So as he's telling me this is where the game's going to be, I'm seeing where he's going to get it to, and I'm closing the game that's not even finished yet. So I'm literally creating quests for systems that haven't even been tested. And this is just ridiculously dangerous, and no one should ever do this. But it fortunately worked out for us. And what I wanted to do, now this is an example of a world that's already been taken care of, but for me, what I loved the idea was that players would have the ability to turn this world into a palette. They can make whatever the hell they want by cutting down trees. They can make it, and this is incredibly important for Facebook players. They want that ability to customize their worlds. And if who doesn't? Like if you walk into WoW and you see people with particle effects flying off of them, everybody loves the ability to customize stuff. And what I wanted to do in the beginning of this game, and this is going back to my favorite moments of Civilization, my Civilization the game, obviously, is as opposed to Civilization the entire thing. Yeah, it was a good thing I clarified because everybody could have been thoroughly confused. I wanted people to go out into the world, and I loved the way Sid Meier put those carrots out there. Like, oh, look, there's something over there for me to get. Oh, there's something now over there. And so in the quest design and in the world design, I had these little carrots in the world, so to speak, metaphorical carrots, that would drag the player from this place to this place and would lead them to explore the entire level, during which they could do all kinds of stuff. But I wanted to get them out of their little shell. And so I was using, probably the lightest form of hardcore game design one could use. But this goes back, Miyamoto has done this a ton of times by showing you something that you would love to get if only you knew how to get it in the first few seconds of gameplay. And we use that heavily in Ravenwood. Quest design, right? So quests are just manna, honest to God. You cannot lead a Facebook game player enough. In fact, one of the criticisms I think people have leveled about WoW is their quest structure is much more linear. But WoW has, can you believe, 12 million, that they only have 12 million players, as compared to the 500 million people on Facebook. And I should just pause for a second to explain that when I think of Facebook, and I've recently had some pretty vicious, maybe they'll get that way, who knows if alcohol is involved. But I've had some pretty heated debates with game developers about Facebook. Effectively they played 5 games, judged the entire platform, which would be like judging the PS2 by BMX XXX, right? I don't really feel that's a fair comparison. Or that is a fair comparison. I don't feel like that would be a fair judgment. And there's lots of games on Facebook that are evolving and showing really cool design patterns. And one of these things that's showing up is quest design. And so players love the ability to be led through games. Now, when you think about this, you're like, well, why would you want that so much? I want to do some of the gameplay for myself. Again, go back and put your head in the mind of that person who's showing up for lunch and they've got a lunchtime grind that they're doing. They're going through 7 games on lunch. You're not going to sit there going, oh, awesome. Well, actually, I should just ask, does anybody play Civilization Revolution? Okay, do you ever save a game?
No.
Right, okay, so you're smarter than me, honest to God, right? Because I will sometimes get 2.5 hours into a game, it's like 4, and I gotta go to bed. And I'll save the game, and if I load the game back up, it's like, what the hell was going on here, right? I don't know, because there's so many things that have got me there that it's literally rendered practically unplayable by me. Facebook game players have got 100 things going on in their life. They're stopping by just to say, hey, how you doing? And the second they show up, they want an assistant practically that says, hi, I'm your game and here's exactly what you need to do here. And players want to come into the game and feel like, yay, accomplishment, I feel good, I got some stuff done and I'm getting out. It's a wonderful diversion. And so these quests provide exactly that. And in fact, I think it's great that WoW does that. And a lot of the things that were built and added on to WoW are to make your gameplay even easier, to let you know when these quests are, part of the way done. So the quest design, I should add here, this is an example of a short-term and long-term quest. Obviously, classic game stuff. So things I can finish now and things that are going to take me, in the case of the Princess's Problems, there was this princess who was getting married. And this entire quest chain to solve it takes about a month and a half. You set the date for the wedding, which actually it's an interesting design diversion. And this is why it's epic to finally, you have to understand, I've been making games since I was 15. I've never used the phrase, it's epic to be a woman in games, ever. But I'm going to use it right now. So it was epic to be a woman. I'm in this design discussion with some programmers who I'm asking, can we set the date for the wedding? I actually want you to get there and you set the date for the wedding. Why would people want to do, like, oh, see, this is why. This is, like I'm thinking about, like the date is important. Why, and like this, the reality is most women I know who have been married, they have their heart set on a date, and then they go to the venue, and the venue says no. So suddenly your heart gets set on this other date, right? But it was super important that you could set the date in the game. And I think, having an awareness of that and being very in touch with your market is super important. And so anyway, in the long-term quest, the first long-term quest in the game was this princess who's getting married, and she needs you to do all these things to Ravenwood to help her get ready for that. But it was setting the date, and then eventually she gets married, and there's a honeymoon and all that kind of stuff. Game balance. So this is super weird, actually. So let me tell you a tragically true story. So while we were doing this, PMs, and this is part of the merger of the social space and the AAA space. So producers usually understand, okay, you're the role of game design. If you screw this up, it's all in your head, and you're the one who's going to be paying for it for years to come. But in the web app space, there's interesting things that happen because the PMs are the keepers of the vision. So when these PMs, who are the keepers of the vision, having made whatever, meet game designers who are like, thanks so much, but the vision is mine. You can just go keep the schedule or whatever it is I need you to do. This never goes well, right? Neither side ever hands off any ownership of anything. So anyway, we had a PM on this particular project who, this was his first time PMing a major game. And he loved to get into design. And it's almost like there's so few people. I mean, you guys are game developers who I don't actually know anybody who does not have an opinion about design. And if you're a game designer, you know that more than others. So I had this conversation with him probably at 1 o'clock in the morning or later and said, you went to Stanford, right? And he says, yes. And I said, then you understand math. I have no idea where I came up with this analysis. But it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So yes, he does. And I said, I'm going to give you a spreadsheet in a minute. Hang on. So I set out a spreadsheet that had the base numbers that I needed for the entire game. And I sent him the spreadsheet, and I said, do you see my mathematical pattern there? Yes. I need you to follow that up. And I'm going to explain to you how, not to you, to him, how I need it to be followed. Now, if you're developing a game, you always start it off super easy. Right? Because you don't want to have to actually work to get through the game, right? So all your numbers are easy. But we're shipping this game in rocket speed. And the game in Facebook world, you ship games when they're just like, literally, it's like delivering a baby at 7 months, right? It's good luck, And so, that's changing. But at the time, it was that danger was ever present. So it only occurred to so he does a great job, and he really does, and he follows this balance, and he gets it all the way. And then we ship the game, and it occurs to me after the game is shipped, in my blurriness, lack of sleep, like, holy shit, I never adjusted the numbers. So that players, when they would have to work toward things to get them. And because, of course, in a real game, if I just say, that's fine, plate mail +5, give me a couple bucks, what do you think, right? And if you do that in a traditional game, players would feel like, oh, that's robbery, I didn't even have to work for that item. Facebook games, they don't want to work for it. They have no desire to work for it, right? It's like, plate mail +5, give me 12, right? They don't care. And so it turned out that when I actually turned the balance back to what theoretically a AAA game design you think it would be, right? I slaughtered monetization. Slaughtered. I heard it a lot.
It went down to half.
Shh. Nobody, that could be considered a slaughter, and I'm trying to not make myself look so bad. So yeah, it was really the amount of change you'd think that you would want to challenge. You would really want to earn something, and you'd feel great about it. No, that's not the case. And so this is one of those great points where things that I have known in 20-some years of making role-playing games that would be so obvious here, that's not necessarily the case in Facebook games. And so the balance, like literally within, next to no time, as soon as it was like, wow, undo, and literally was left there. But that was just a very interesting lesson and a good case of game design and metrics working together to solve a potentially catastrophic problem. So where we're at with the game, we didn't just, I guess last week went over 10 million, which is just unbelievable, like crazy unbelievable. And somebody tweeted, they wrote an article on this actually, and I caught it on Twitter, and we have no idea if this fact is even true, but that it took Doom 2 years to reach 10 million players, and Ravenwood Fair, it took 4 months. which is just ridiculous, ridiculously awesome. And this is, for those of you who are not familiar with the term MAU, it's we're talking about monthly players here. So this is 10 million people in the last month have played the game, which is not reflective of 10 million people who have played it since the beginning. There's obviously been much more because the game, players come in and they go out, and there's the standard churn. Let's see. Oh, you should talk about this since I would be making it up.
So typically, in looking at all the games on Facebook, they basically take place on this ISO grid. And that ISO grid can be expanded, usually in a store. You can buy a couple extra rows or whatever. And to me, that seemed like really artificial, not fun, really sloppy design. And the world doesn't look interesting usually when you do that. Like Frontierville has just solid green around the whole world, and at least Nightclub City gives you a corner block that adds a couple rows of dance floor as you expand, but it's still not really exciting. And with Ravenwood, you're on a floating rock in the air, so it's this fairy tale storybook kind of thing. So we could do whatever we want. And so there's nowhere to go from this rock, and people at around level 12 have destroyed everything and decorated the entire place with buildings and flowers and everything. And it's just packed, and it's like, I think they kind of feel like we're done. And say stop spending money and maybe leave the game because they've finished decorating the whole thing, and then time for the next game. And so I want to, I know that as a player going through a game, I want to see new things. I want to experience new stuff. When I hit a boundary like that, I'm not happy because I feel like I am done. So in designing where Ravenwood would go, my thought was, I don't want to take a cheap design way out where, I'll just build a bridge off the side of the world over to another floating rock and just take the easy way out. I wanted to do something that was going to be more interesting, that would kind of show more, better design, and in a way of like, here's how we're going to keep on expanding the world. So my thought was that players want more land space to build their fair on, and I don't want them to go to a store and just buy another couple of rocks over on the edge or whatever. I want them to actually build the rocks themselves, make those rocks. And to do that, I wanted them to actually be able to get stone to do it. And up on top of the forest, you have a few stones and you get crystals out of them and you're kind of done. There's not that many rocks up there. So to give the player a total change of scenery, music, everything, I thought that it'd be cool to actually go and start a mine down in the center of the rock that you're on. So it's called Ravenstone Mine. And it's part of Ravenwood Fair. So the game's still called Ravenwood Fair, but every new part of the game will have a new name for that location in the game. So down in the rock, it's called Ravenstone Mine. It has the new song in it. It's got all the graphics are new, and so the idea is that you are doing just like the tree chopping up on top, except that now you're using a pickaxe and you're cutting stone underground, kind of like Dig Dug. You're chewing up the entire inside of the rock. And I've always wanted to see a game with a Zorn in it, which is an old D&D monster from the first monster manual. It can phase shift through rock, and I've never seen it in any kind of game ever. And so I put a Zorn in the rock, so that's one of the monsters. And also, if people play the classics, or have watched the classic Star Trek series, the Horda, which was in the Devil in the Dark episode, I put a Horda in there as a monster as well, because they can go through rock. And so the game is full of references. Every single thing that you see in the game, if you Google it, you'll find out what it really means, because it's usually a reference to something, if not, kids or, our kids or friends of ours. There's always a real reference to whatever's in the game. Like there's the protectors up on top have there's all these protectors that keep people, your fair goers, from being afraid. And so we have the same kind of thing down below in the mine, because there's earthquakes that happen all the time. And Zorns are kind of going to start coming out of the rocks. And as you build mining machines down there, it attracts mole miners. And the mole miners work on the machines to generate materials for you. And they get scared and they want to run to a protector. And so there's like a giant canary in a huge iron cage that you can get. And he looks really funny. And his name is Mackley, which is the name of a guy in Norwich, England, that actually had like 50,000 canaries. So there's all references to everything in this game. But basically, you're down there in a mine. It's like the same kind of play patterns that you have up on top, but a little bit different. And there is in designing Ravenwood at the very beginning, there wasn't the idea of a mine at the beginning. It was just like, here's the place this is the game that we're gonna make, and people are gonna play in it. And then as we watch how people are filling it up, it's like they need to go somewhere. So we need to come up with some more design here. So then we kind of extend the story. I kind of extend the story off of that, and now because I extended it down to be in the mine, I extended it a couple places past that as well. But it was important to kind of get people a change of scenery and a change of audio and everything else to kind of show, hey, this is kind of going to be a fun kind of a roller coaster to go through with lots of quests and stuff. But because we designed the next phase of the game, it does have a beginning and an end clearly defined. So we're rolling it out tomorrow, and it has an end. And we're designing the next piece of where that goes. And we'll be delivering that in a few months. But yeah, it was real important to kind of come up with what's the future of this game and how do we kind of resolve the whole thing and what's the big story arc of the whole ecosystem that you're creating here.
I think the challenge, so this is like one of the great assets of traditional game developers coming into this space, is that I feel like a lot of games get hurled out there with an asterisk on the end of them that says, if this game succeeds, then we'll worry. Which is obviously you should, right? And having this overall world design and what you can possibly do. A lot of times when games succeed, people will say, players are bored, they're leaving, what are we going to do? We'll throw more content at them. But more content isn't the answer, because more content is just literally more of the same thing. It doesn't matter. It's the new play patterns, new play spaces, making it different in their brains so that there's something new to master, something new to enjoy. And tragically also something new to eventually want something more of. I think probably the best example I've ever seen of this done in games, introducing regular new play patterns, is a whole Ratchet and Clank series, which just literally introduces new play patterns brilliantly. Absolutely love that game series. So what we've learned, a whole bunch of things. Facebook games, oh my God, I can't even tell you how specialized this is. One of the things that I frequently see is people who come in and, oh, they're easy players. This is, this will be cake. No, these are like super, they just want to click on stuff. No, actually, they don't. This is a really specialized type of design. We're talking asynchronous play with, many millions of players who, and actually probably one of the easiest ways to explain it, and I'm planning to write an article for Inside Social Games on this, is we tend to look at, if you saw me designing a console title, you would see me sitting back in a chair holding a controller with my eyes closed, playing the game in my head, trying to see what it feels like. In Facebook, I don't care what's on that screen as much as I care what's on the 5 different things that I'm thinking about, right? So the 5 different things are, first, the game itself, what I'm staring at. And that is one place. That's actually what am I doing second to entertain me. Then the next space is what's happening on the feeds, because the feeds is a whole metagame. And it's not just a metagame to make the game viral, right? Because, it's like, hey, will you advertise for free? Cute. No, right? People aren't interested in doing that. It's what's in it for me. So there's going to play the feeds, and I love games who know how to do this. I actually enjoy crawling the feeds to get free stuff and to help other people. So that's the second play space. And I've already talked about the Facebook blob. That's the third play space. You got to fit perfectly into that blob, because if your game doesn't feel like part of my daily grind, your HUD is somehow too weird and doesn't make me feel like I know that, goodbye, I'm out. I'll find somebody else who fits conveniently into the Facebook blob. Then the fourth play space is what am I doing in my friends area? Right? So how do I translate my play into play for them? And this is, of course, asynchronous and completely fake socialization, but who cares? And just a random point before I get to the fifth one, someone today had this discussion with him, well, social games aren't really social. And I was like, how are you at the Apple I? Were you, or not Apple I, how are you in 1981 with the Apple II? Because I worked on a game called Wizardry. And I remember Wizardry was just me and that computer. And I remember a DM saying to me, my DM from actual D&D, saying to me, that game is completely unsocial. It's just you and a computer. But we forget that. Anyway, that's my random rant, part of my upcoming rant. So you have those 4 spaces, and then the 5th space is what makes me want to come back. And these are the things that are manna to me as a game designer. What is actually pulling your player back into the game? So the 5th space is what's happening in my head, what's happening in your player's head. And when you are designing for 5 friggin' spaces at one point in time, that is this incredibly specialized market. a specialized type of design, particularly if you're not designing for a player you've ever designed for. So like with John and I, this whole protectors thing he has in the game is just to keep the fairgoers safe. And like here's the real, close to the real conversation. I told him I couldn't get closure, and I never felt good when I left Ravenwood Fair, ever. And this is obviously prior to its release. But I said, I never feel good when I leave. And he said, why? And I said, because I feel like my little guys are going to get eaten by the monsters. And he says, well, you understand that doesn't really happen, right? Like the game doesn't attack the characters, and they don't. And I'm like, okay, but I still don't feel good about it. The game, I cannot leave in a state where I feel like, all right, everything is set. I can walk away from this now and feel good. So but to him, right, he could not, like, why does this bother you? So there was two ways he could have gone at this juncture. I'm talking about as if you're not here. So there are two ways he could have gone at this juncture. One was just like, wow, you're weird, thanks for sharing. And then the other way was to like, I have no idea what the hell, why this is bothersome to you, but I'm going to basically pick your brain until I figure it out. And so that was like this tremendous benefit of, having this designers with, two different brains, like him actually querying me as a player, like, why does this matter to you? Why do you feel the need? Why, and anyway, all these different questions that he asked me. And so we will periodically run into what I refer to, I don't know whether they're gendered issues in game design or not, or in gameplay, but there are periodically issues that I will have that he literally he would never feel these things, but we have these, or why is this bothersome to you? And then the protectors actually were put in to resolve that issue that I had. And even though I knew the math behind the game, even though I could have said, like, listen, this is my account, nobody dies. Even though I could have done that, it was necessary for me to have that stuff in there.
One other interesting thing about the specialization of design in this space is an example that it's kind of weird but it has to do completely with the social platform. Players for 1 week after the game launched, Facebook decided to shut down Ravenwood's viral channels, which means you can't gift to each other, can't get new neighbors and stuff. Pretty much gifting and stuff is dead in the game. You can still buy stuff. You can still like use Facebook credits and buy all the items out of the store that you want. But when they shut down that viral channel where you just send stuff to friends or whatever, monetization dropped almost completely out. So people have to send stuff back and forth to each other.
So
it's
they couldn't
free.
get stuff for free, so they wouldn't buy it either.
If they couldn't get it for free, they're going to just leave. They're not interested. If they can't send things back and forth, they're not interested in the game. And even though they could, the monetization was doing really, really good, they turn off the social features, which are just sending free things back and forth. They're not interested in playing anymore because they can't connect with friends. So that's how important the socialization is on this platform. If your game gets shut off from just sending just basic stuff, I mean, they could just buy the stuff in the store.
Or if your virals are just like, hey, I gained a level, thanks, who cares, I'm done.
Yeah, but if you, if the common sense says, oh, well, the viral channels are shut off, they're just going to spend more money in the store now that they can't get those things for free. No, they don't want to play the game anymore. Pretty crazy.
All right. So two different cultures. I've already alluded to this. So and there's a couple other things that we'll point out. So the traditional game developers, our reliance or our even awareness or our caring about metrics is a fairly new thing. Whereas the web app space has, well, I shouldn't say, if you've been making MMOs for a long time, you're like, that's fascinating, Brenda, shut up, we've been doing this for a while. But there's two different cultures that come together, basically the dark and the light, I guess. And different things, probably the PM game designer clash is the biggest, but the different silos. And for us, walking in there, and this is a group of people who had not shipped a full-on game. It was a radical change, and they did amazingly. They were just a super awesome team, but the different cultures, it was really fascinating. The unawareness. Like I actually put this on the wall when somebody said, "Who's Will Wright?" And I thought, that's going on the wall right there. Who is Will Wright? This explains every problem I'm having tonight. Not that Will Wright has the answers, but if you don't know who Will Wright is, I had an issue with that.
They had never shipped a game before Ravenwood?
No, they had games.
Not the team that we were working with. Not the Ravenwood team.
Yeah. So it was a radically different. They had many games at that point, but this particular team, no. And so the two different cultures. There's lots of different things. Rolling products live. absolute insanity about we don't want bugs, all these different things. Like for many game developers, when I talked to a friend of ours who also works at a social company, he said the very first game he shipped, he was mortified and wanted no friends to know. And I thought, holy shit, like why? And he said, because they rolled it out at like pre-alpha, it was like tripping and falling over itself, and I didn't want any of my friends to come see it. And I remember we were the same way. It was like, my God, don't let this game go. Like you can't even understand how many, just the, and I get, so let me just like from this web app side of my head, which like I'm channeling this because I don't really have one, but from the web app side of my head, it's sort of like, well, look, we could alpha the game in-house and we could get a bunch of people to alpha test the game for us. But why don't we just put it out there and have them alpha test it and we might make $20? And logically, it makes sense. And there was a time in Facebook and Facebook ecosystem when you could do that, and you'd like, oh, the press isn't going to cover it, nobody's going to say anything about it, don't worry about it. Except with Ravenwood Fair, literally within 24 hours after its release, 5 media sites had already covered the game. And now there's people who are out there looking, like what are the new Facebook games and who's developing it, and being able to be the first media site to say, we found a new game by whomever. And even going to the point that they're checking URL registrations. So the time that you could just put it out there for a secret launch is, pretty well over. People are doing closed betas now, and that's what we've been doing with Ravenstone Mine.
You only launch once.
Yeah, okay, so my God, you have no idea about this. You seriously have no idea. Just imagine if somebody, it's the morning of your wedding and somebody drags you out of bed and says, we're going now. You'd be like, what? This is how it feels because the game, so for instance, when Ravenwood shipped, and this is part of the clash of cultures, right? And I should say, I believe that eventually this mothership crashing into this mothership is going to produce something that's unique and new and interesting, and it's going to be okay. But during this clash period that we're in right now, it feels very terrifying and weird. So with Ravenwood, because you change things as a designer, like, oh, that's got to change, and you restart it. So by the time it ships, neither of us have played past level 8 in the current iteration of the game, which is horrifying, right? Literally in the traditional game industry, it'd be, how far did you get level 8 and you shipped it? You're fired, right? It's just be ridiculous, right?
You didn't finish the game?
Right, so, nobody finished
it?
this thing and we're sending it, and it was, and so it was this wild, like things happened, so I think probably 2 days after, there was a friend of ours who burned through a paycheck apparently and mowed down all the trees and it effectively carpet bombed her world in brown tiles, which were the cheapest things, to prevent trees from going back. So this showed two things. One, the protectors weren't working and wasn't messaged correctly, which was a bug. And then the second thing was, oh God, yeah, people are going to do that. That's ugly. Which we'd not thought of because we just hadn't gotten that far, right? And we didn't have any play. So this is, it's this terrifying form of testing. Now you see, this is just, God, I wish this would stop, and hopefully it is. But it's often people in the social space, since they're rolling constant and live, the tendency to just send it out there earlier. If you haven't done this yet, it's a very terrifying thing for a traditional game developer.
Yeah, we have a friend who shipped a game early and it didn't have any music, and it was like, what?
Or friend grind.
or anything. Really.
Yeah, so like literally the legs.
The whole game was bad.
The legs of the game were just not there. So if you happen to be one of the first arrivers on the game, you're like, is this an accident? Did it come out early? So yeah, that was interesting. So credits, yeah. So this is also part of the culture, right? So some of you may actually know, like, who was the lead coder on Amazon? All right, I don't have the foggiest idea. I do know some of the people who coded the original eBay, and I know some of the people who coded the original PayPal. But largely, in the web app space, it's not like, okay, guys, we need you, who's programming, who is art? Because, where on Amazon's site are the coders? Now, there's somebody who's a badass who worked there. There's probably many badasses who worked there. And who knows? But in the game industry, credits are something that we've obviously, fought for. If you haven't, please do, because if you're ever trying to be hired, somebody is eventually going to go to Moby Games. Today, in fact, I went to Moby Games somebody submitted a resume saying they were lead designer on a product for the guy he employs, who's the actual lead designer on said product. So, like, checking things on Moby Games is common. And if you want a track record, like, yeah, I worked on this game. Like right now, I could tell you I was the lead designer on WoW. Now it's an obvious lie, right? But if you want to have this track record, credits are important, and this is a creative industry. It's what we do. So part of the problem, however, is the super snipe culture in San Francisco, which is, if you have programmers, we would like to have them. Thank you very much. And so listing programmers could be like, oh my God, if we list them, this could be a problem. Now the game industry had this tremendous issue back in the 90s, which is if we list the team, we'll get sniped to death. And that lasted for a very short period of time. And what ended up happening is the game developers who weren't getting credits left those companies to go to companies where they would get credits. And the game industry instead built a culture of loyalty. So you just would not leave before a product was done because it was considered just a tremendous black mark on your resume. And that people stayed because of loyalty and because they loved the games and they loved the team, and it was a great place to work, not a great place to get a free haircut. And so for us, we decided it was very important for us to get credits in the game, and hats off to LOLAPS for finally succumbing and listening to our argument. So basically, if you just click on the screen and type credits, the whole list of credits comes up, and the game is one of the first social games now in Moby Games because of that. So it was our own little personal mission.
But they're still afraid of credits being out there. That's why it's a cheat code.
Yeah, so I think, but it's still in the game, right? Which I think is a huge, at least a step in the right direction. So everybody's like, awesome, we're going to snipe but please don't do that. That would be horrible. But so anyway, credits are still important, and we're putting them on our game. Iterating in concrete. This is, I think these are all part of the culture clash. So the iteration, part of it is, but why, if you haven't worked with the magical and insane beast that is the game designer, you're trying to create fun. So it's sort of your best guess. It is like, I'm going to cook a recipe that I've never cooked, but wait, I don't even have a recipe. I'm going to make a recipe to cook a dish I theoretically hope will come out like this. And inevitably, you don't have enough salt, you put it in for too long, it's just garbage, whatever. And so in the game industry, we know it's like, thanks coders for doing that. That was wrong, and I need you to do it again. And while that can always be irritating, it is part of what games do. There's this great line, I'm stealing this from Ryan Reynolds, who stole it from Sid Meier, which is jam stuff in, rip stuff out. So, just trying to find that nugget of fun. And once you find that nugget of fun, protecting it and building upon that nugget of fun. But stuff goes in and stuff comes out, and you're constantly trying things to find that. Whereas in the developing apps, it's like, well, here's the design document. Thank you very much. I'll take this to the programmers now, and have a nice year, right? And with this, it was just like, wow, we just gave you this, but why isn't it done? Why didn't it work the first time? Because I'm a game designer, and it's literally just theories. But you've been doing this for 30 years, yes, and apparently I'm no better. I'm not saying that's, hopefully I do make better first guesses, and so does he. But you don't necessarily know how all these systems are going to work until you actually see them in motion, and things need to change. The amount of change that the game industry finds acceptable and normal is not acceptable and normal in the web app space. Like, things iterate live in response to customers, not because a game designer goes, oh, no, that's not going to work. Well, let's put it out there and see if the customers, in fact, think it's not going to work. But we were able to get a ton of different iterations in Ravenwood.
After pushing hard.
Yeah, but it got through.
He was like, hey, change this thing to do this. Why would I want to do, you don't know that that's going to really work, right? It's like, no, you need to put it in there for me to know that it works. Mm-hmm. Well, what if you have to change it again? Why don't I just do that thing instead? It's like, I don't even know what that thing's going to be. Do that first, we find out there's something wrong, and then do the next thing.
Yeah, I think it's just a cultural thing. Like, game design is a phenomenally imprecise field, and you get more precise as you learn things. And we are just a couple of years into Facebook at this point in time, so there's lots of imprecision and lots of things happening that change rapidly. In fact, there was a guy that I worked with at Slide whose job was literally to notice, maybe he had other things he was doing, but literally to notice every change in every competitor's product. So I would get emails saying they changed this from yellow to blue. And I would actually go, why did they do that? And they did it in all their products, what the hell? Right? So that sort of stuff. And once that happens in one place, you will watch that
proliferation.
Thank you, because I'm drinking tons of water and drunk now, apparently. You'll watch that go out all over the place to all these other people.
What we've learned about small teams are awesome, which I've known since I started making games. It just blew up into some big teams every once in a while, and getting back to a small team is way better than big teams. one kind of weird thing is the bigger the team gets, the slower progress gets, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, I
You wouldn't think
had
that.
got a resume from a guy who was on a team, and he was one, and this blows me away, he was one of 100 game designers at a game, and I thought, what the hell are all you people doing? But it was a massive game, right? So I could theoretically see, but I was just like, what would 100 get? That would just, to me, everything that could ever go wrong
It's a
would go
nightmare.
wrong. Yeah, that's what it felt like.
What was the game?
I won't say. I'll protect the game. But it's won awards, and it was great.
Is it an MMO?
Next slide. Design. So this, this was his original, and why am I talking? You're right there. Go. I do this to you. My problem.
Yeah, I've always believed that design is really like the whole reason why we're playing these games. It's, sometimes people play games because the tech is really cool, and but if the game design's really bad, then who cares about the tech? After creating these, the games that did software where we were pushing, creating new engines and these new ways of playing games. We had to have a game design in the technology, and when we got to the point with Quake where all of the really hard work that we did creating the software rasterizers for Quake was going to be useless the next year when all the hardware, 3D hardware cards were coming out, it's like, well, all that awesome technical knowledge for doing that is now useless tomorrow, next year. It's useless. But still, we still need amazing design. Your amazing programming on this engine needs to change to be some other kind of amazing technology programming to go further than what we have here. But still, it all hinges on design. And as you can see in the social space, you can have a team of people that can sit there. They're great programmers. They're great artists. They can sit there for months and months spinning around on something they don't even really know what they're working on, but then come in and basically design something for them, and those same people can create a great thing. And it's because of the design. The people were all the same.
And all the successes in the Facebook space so far have been, it's still design-led, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so going forward, go ahead and take that.
So in November last year, I started a company called Loot Drop. Ravenwood shipped on October 19th, and that was 2.5 months, basically, little less than 2.5 months after starting on the game. And I saw that it was really successful. Within the first month, I knew that it was going to do really well, and that all the designs I kind of was proved out in Ravenwood was totally valid in the social market, and that I could go forward with that as pretty much a baseline for future designs. And I wanted to, Loot Drop is my 8th company that I've founded, and in my last, I have several companies I founded that are still going now, even right now. The last company that I had was my MMO company, Gazillion, which has raised $160 million, has 350 people, 3 offices, 6 MMOs. It's a huge company, and it's more interesting for me to go into social and do it really small and start again really with a small team, making a completely different kind of game than an MMO. And so with Loot Drop, we basically wanted to do something that hasn't existed in the industry, I don't think ever, which is basically get together a company of industry vets that have 30 years of experience in the industry. We have 6 of them in this company right now. We have 6 vets, 30 years apiece. And our youngest person's 16 years in the industry. And so we're basically building a small team of super vets to create these social games because we can get them done really fast. It's like 1981 all over again, but we've seen this already. It's easy for us to create these games at a really high speed because programming this stuff is not going above and beyond any hardcore title. This is really easy stuff to code. So we can get this done really fast. And what the most important part of all of this is that we know how to design for this space, this new kind of design. That's actually the hardest part of of the whole puzzle, and the execution with a team of vets like that is going to make everything go fast and easy.
Should add, it's team of vets with social experience, because I think that is absolutely critical. A team of vets getting together without social experience could be an absolute catastrophe. Like, wow, we need a 3D engine and guns in Facebook, and that would just make it rock.
Right. The CEO of the company is the guy who founded the company that published Wizardry and created Wizardry in 1980. So he had that company for 26 years, and then he sold it all off, and now he's our new CEO, co-founder of the company.
All right, so that's it. If you guys have any questions, I don't know if we have time for them. But
I know I wanted to because I was gone a little over, but I definitely want to tap into this wealth of knowledge we have up here. So we'll go ahead and do a couple of questions. Hands first.
I saw a guy way over there go up first.
Hi, Peter from Video. Can you guys share maybe a game mechanic or a gameplay that you're seeing come out now that you find to be really interesting? Or maybe share something from the mine shop?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that Ravenwood is really forging ahead with a lot of the new designs that basically you have a world that works the way that Ravenwood works. And to make it more interesting over time, not only are we rolling out this mine, but we're also layering on new gameplay systems into the existing world. So the systems that we're rolling in aren't in any other Facebook game. So it makes sense for what the fair is. So it's going to be, I feel that we're pretty much at the forefront of doing that, in addition to the game that she's working on for LOL Apps is going to be doing something that no game in the whole industry has done. So it's, yeah, well, I don't think it has. So we're doing, I think we're pretty much at the vanguard, I think, of social game design, and that's why we're working with several companies. I mean, we're working with LOL Apps to continue this stuff. We're working, with Loot Drop, Rock You, and some other social players designing their games for them as well. So, because we know the space now, we can kind of test out some theories with other companies and see how they go.
The thing that's fascinating about it is like in saying, we're the vanguard. So like there's like a, I don't know, it's like the eye of the hurricane, right? And there's a bunch of us that are there. And if somebody does something tomorrow, we'll know about it, if not tonight, right? So if they're going to do something, that stuff, it's not like you release a game and a year later somebody releases something else. Like I still remember the incredible near-death experience of Myst and Doom releasing in the same year. And being a game developer and just going, holy shit, we are so far behind. Oh my God, right? And that feeling, but here in the social space, it's like, what did they do? How long is that going to take us to do that? Boom, it's in, right? So you are either at the forefront or you're not. It's like one of two places. And what I'm seeing, just in a very general answer to your question, the games that are succeeding are the ones who are moving away from they only want to show up a few times a day, to allowing the player to play as long as they want. And they're much more active play spaces and much more active mechanics. If you look at maybe, I don't know what iteration you want to call it, but I'll say Facebook 2.0 in games. It was, you show up, you do everything you can possibly do, now get the hell out and come back in whatever time the thing tells you to come back in. The new wave of Facebook games is going, hi, how are you? If you got 5 minutes, here's what you need to do. You got more? Trust me, there's tons more for you to do. So they don't gate the player's experience. And it's very active, and you can play as long as you want to play. And that, I would say, that is kind of the front. That's the much more active play space is where I think the top of the line Facebook games are right now.
So let's just take one more, and then
Okay.
if you're willing to stay around for a little bit after, it's
Yeah.
up to you two. But,
Sure.
One more question? Go ahead and choose.
I'm gonna. He's a very nice smile. Go ahead.
Well, two-part question.
Oh, cheater!
But the second question, I think everyone wants to know. Well, the first question is, do you ever see like first-person shooter or other hardcore game types ever reaching the social gaming space?
Yes.
Can you say that? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
A lot of the hardcore guys are just going to use it as a platform, like a PS2 as a platform, but doesn't mean it's going to be popular.
Yeah, there's 500 million people there, right? So, for now, and it's growing, which means eventually there's, those people that want to be entertained by other games, and we're already seeing, games like Kingdoms of Camelot, which I find, was incredibly challenging for me to even get into. But it has a solid player base. 5 million players. There's few people who wouldn't kill for 5 or 6 or whatever it's up to now. I mean,
5.6.
Yeah, it's a lot of players, and that is a hardcore-ish game for Facebook. And even if you look at the very earliest Facebook games, which were super, super simple, the ramp that Facebook players have done just in the space of a year and a half is pretty miraculous. They've learned, what is a friend grind? What's this friend ladder? What do levels mean? What are damage points? What are experience points? What is gold and
What's
how
energy?
do I use it? What is an entire economy? Right? I mean, these are game players who have grokked this knowledge over the space of a year, and that's really a pretty astronomical growth. So, and even the players who used to like the super simple things are growing hungry for more complex things. So Facebook is a unique platform that actually provides a ramp for players. And it only makes sense that eventually the players who are playing these games are going to want to get into that. And if you look at who's entering the social space, now, I mean, Sid Meier's in, Brian Reynolds in, Mike Verdue's in, we're in, Tom Hall is in, Steve Moretsky, obviously, Brian Reynolds, if I didn't already say him, if I did, oh well, he gets another plug. But there's all these old school game designers who are coming into the space. Bruce Shelley.
Don Daglow,
yeah, who are all coming into the Facebook space. So it's inevitable.
So, there might be like a Wolfenstein of the social gaming realm eventually.
Well, probably not Wolf.
Faceville?
Well, not like-
Or Farmville, maybe? I mean,
You say Faceville?
Faceville. I mean, I'm sure they'll do that. Villeville. They did Cityville already. So.
Bill.
Medieval.
Yeah, I know. Totally medieval. I mean, yeah.
Let's give John and Brenda a round of applause.
Thanks.
So apparently, I'm going to take a moment and talk about